There's a moment in every woman's life when she watches someone else achieve what she thought was impossible. And today, I'm going to tell you a story about one of those moments that changed everything. But before I do, I need you to understand something. You know that feeling when you're sitting on the edge of your seat, when your heart is pounding so hard you can feel it in your throat, and you're wondering if what you're about to witness is real? That's where we need to start, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about determination, about breaking barriers, and about what it really means to be unstoppable. For decades, there was something that seemed impossible. A wall. An invisible wall. But this wall wasn't made of concrete or brick. It was made of records, of dominance, of a legacy so powerful that nobody dared to even dream of breaking through it. The Jamaican sprinters. Year after year, Olympic after Olympic, championship after championship, they reigned supreme in the 100 meters. They owned that track. They owned that distance. And every American who tried to challenge them felt the weight of that dominance pressing down on their shoulders like a physical force that wouldn't let them break free. The world watched. Women around the globe watched. And many of them, especially women like you, women in their 30s, 40s and beyond, who remembered the glory days of American athletics, felt something stirring inside. A question that wouldn't go away. A nagging doubt. Could America ever reclaim what they once had? Could any American woman find the strength, the speed, the pure audacity to stand on that podium and face down the Jamaican dynasty that seemed unbeatable, invincible, eternal? But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where the real tension begins. There was one woman who refused to accept the narrative that everyone else had already written. She refused to play a supporting role in someone else's story. She looked at that wall, that seemingly unbreakable barrier that the Jamaicans had built through years of training, through genetics, through a kind of determination that most people never even experience, and she said no. Not today. Not ever again. She was going to shatter that wall into a million pieces, and she was going to do it in front of the entire world. Her name would become synonymous with courage. Her story would inspire countless women who were watching, who were waiting to see if such a thing was even possible. Because you see, when a woman breaks through a barrier like that, when she refuses to be confined by what others have decided is the limit, she's not just winning a race. She's breaking the chains that have held back an entire nation. She's telling every other woman watching that what you're told is impossible might just be the exact thing you're capable of achieving. The stage was set. The track was ready. And the world was about to witness something that would change the conversation about American athletics forever. But the journey to that moment wasn't easy. Far from it. It was filled with obstacles, with setbacks, with moments of doubt that would have broken most people. But this woman was not most people. She was exceptional. She was rare. She was the kind of athlete that comes around once in a generation, if you're lucky enough to witness it. Think about what it takes to compete at that level. Think about the sacrifices. The early morning runs when your body is screaming at you to stop. The strict diets. The mental training that pushes you to the edge of what your mind can handle. The pressure of knowing that millions of people are watching, waiting to see if you'll succeed or fail, if you'll be the hero or the cautionary tale. That's the kind of weight this woman was carrying into every single training session, every competition, every moment of her athletic life. And then there was the psychological aspect. The Jamaicans had something that was almost impossible to quantify but absolutely impossible to ignore. They had confidence. They had a winning culture. They had a history of excellence that stretched back for years. Every time an American sprinter lined up against them, there was this underlying current of doubt. Not always conscious, but always present. A tiny voice in the back of your mind that whispers, "Are they just better? Is this just how it is? Is this how it will always be?" But our American sprinter had something different. She had hunger. Real, raw, desperate hunger. She had watched the Jamaicans dominate for so long that she had made a decision. She decided that if it was going to change, if America was going to reclaim its place at the top of the sprint world, it was going to have to be her. It was going to have to start with her. And that kind of determination, that kind of belief in yourself when everything around you is telling you that you're probably not good enough, that's what separates the champions from everyone else. The training sessions became something almost legendary among those who witnessed them. She wasn't just training to be good. She wasn't training to be competitive. She was training to be unstoppable. Every drill was designed to build not just physical speed, but also mental fortitude. Every repetition was an act of defiance against the narrative that said Jamaica owned the 100 meters, that American sprinters were always going to be second best, that the age of American dominance in this event was over. Her coaches saw something special. They saw the way her eyes would lock in during training. The way she would push herself past the point where most athletes would stop. The way she seemed to have this internal fire that never went out, no matter how many times she competed, no matter how many setbacks she faced. They knew they were working with something rare. They knew they were helping to shape potentially one of the greatest sprinters that America had ever produced. But the pressure was building. Major competitions were coming up. The world was watching other American sprinters, wondering if any of them could finally break the Jamaican stranglehold on women's sprinting. There was pressure from the media, pressure from the fans, pressure from the entire nation that desperately wanted to see an American woman stand on top of the podium in the 100 meters. And while this particular sprinter didn't seek out that pressure, while she didn't dwell on it constantly, it was always there, a constant weight that she had to learn to carry. What makes this story even more compelling is the personal journey that led her to this moment. This wasn't someone who just woke up one day and decided to become a world-class sprinter. There were sacrifices made. There were friendships that had to be put on hold. There were moments when she questioned whether it was all worth it, whether the dream was worth the price she was paying. These are the kinds of doubts that most people experience, especially women over 35, who understand that life requires choices, that you can't have everything, that pursuing excellence in one area often means sacrificing other things that are also important. But she kept going. She kept training. She kept running. And with each competition, with each race, she was getting faster. She was getting closer. The gap between her times and the best times in the world was closing, millimeter by millimeter, hundredth of a second by hundredth of a second. The trajectory was clear. She was building toward something. Everyone could feel it. The question was, when would she unleash it? When would she finally show the world what she was truly capable of? The moment finally arrived. The World Championships. The biggest stage in athletics. Every nation brought their best. Every athlete brought their A game. The media coverage was intense. Cameras were everywhere. Commentators were speculating about who would win, about whether this might finally be the year that someone broke the Jamaican dominance. The Jamaican sprinters were there too, of course, confident as always, carrying with them the weight of years of victories, the expectation that they would win again, just like they always did. Our American sprinter arrived at the track with a calmness that belied the storm of emotion inside her. She had prepared for this moment for so long. She had dreamed about it. She had visualized it in her mind 1,000 times. She knew what she had to do. She knew what was at stake. For her personally, of course, but also for every American who was watching, who was hoping, who was waiting to see if this was finally going to be the moment when the narrative changed. The preliminary heats went smoothly. She advanced easily, barely breaking a sweat. The semifinals were next, and again, she moved forward, getting faster, getting sharper, preparing her body and her mind for what was to come. And then it was time. The finals. The race that would determine everything. The 100 meters that would either confirm that Jamaica was still on top, or that America was ready to reclaim its throne. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric. The crowd was deafening. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. 6 women stepped onto the track. One of them was Jamaican, a runner with an incredible resume, with victories piling up like trophies. One of them was our American. And the others were strong competitors from around the world, each with their own dreams, their own ambitions, their own reasons for being there. They stepped into their blocks. The adrenaline in the stadium reached a fever pitch. The announcer's voice faded away. Time seemed to slow down. Everything that had led to this moment, everything that had been sacrificed, everything that had been dreamed and hoped for and believed in, it all came down to the next 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would change everything. The gun went off. The explosion of speed and power was immediate. 8 limbs pumping. 8 hearts racing. All of them pushing with everything they had. The Jamaican runner exploded out of the blocks as expected, her training and her experience and her genetic gifts all combining to give her that explosive start. She was fast. She was strong. She was exactly what the world expected her to be. But something was different this time. Something had changed. The American was right there. Not trailing behind like so many times before. Not giving ground. Not accepting second place. She was matching the Jamaican stride for stride. She was keeping pace. She was refusing to be left behind. And as they hit the halfway point of the race, something extraordinary started to happen. The American began to pull ahead. Inch by inch. The Jamaican, shocked that her typical dominance wasn't materializing, began to push harder. But the American pushed harder too. She had trained for this exact moment. She had prepared her body and her mind to be able to give everything in the last 50 meters, the most critical part of the race where champions are truly separated from everyone else. Her legs were pumping. Her arms were driving. Her breathing was controlled. Everything was perfect. The crowd was absolutely losing their minds. Women in the stands were on their feet, screaming, crying, unable to believe what they were seeing. Because it was happening. It was actually happening. The American was not just competing with the Jamaican. She was beating her. She was faster. She was stronger. She was better on this day, at this moment, on this track. They crossed the finish line. The American broke the tape first. But it wasn't just that she won. It was how she won. It was by a margin that left no room for doubt. It was decisive. It was dominant. And then, as the seconds ticked by and the official times were posted on the scoreboard, the stadium erupted into absolute pandemonium. The American had not only beaten the Jamaican. She had broken the world record. A world record. In the 100 meters. For women. She had shattered a record that had stood for years. She had rewritten the record books. She had done the thing that so many had said was impossible, that so many had thought was beyond the realm of possibility, that so many had accepted would never happen in their lifetime. The time on the board was staggering. A confirmation of what everyone had just witnessed. The American was not just a top sprinter. She was now the fastest woman in the world over 100 meters. The Jamaican legacy in this event had been challenged and defeated. The narrative had changed in the span of less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would be remembered forever. As the American stood on the top of the podium, as she heard the national anthem playing, as she watched the American flag rising into the air, there was a moment of pure, unadulterated emotion. All the sacrifice. All the doubt. All the pressure. All the moments when she wondered if she was good enough. All of it had been worth it. All of it had been leading to this exact moment. But what makes this story even more powerful is what it meant beyond just her personal victory. Women all over America were watching. Women over 35, who had grown up with dreams of their own, who had sacrificed, who had pushed, who had wondered if it was all worth it, were seeing a reflection of their own struggles and their own potential in this moment. They were seeing someone who refused to accept the limitations that others had placed on her. They were seeing someone who looked at an impossible dream and said, "I'm going to do this anyway." The interviews after the race were emotional. The American sprinter talked about the Jamaican runners with respect, but also with clarity about what had just happened. She talked about her teammates, her coaches, her family. She talked about the sacrifice and the training and the moments of doubt. But most importantly, she talked about refusing to accept that something was impossible just because it had never been done before. She talked about the power of belief, about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, about the transformative nature of refusing to give up even when the odds are stacked against you. The world took notice. Other American athletes, particularly women in sprinting and other athletic pursuits, felt emboldened. If one American could break through the Jamaican dominance, if one American could run the fastest time in the world in the 100 meters, then what else was possible? What other barriers could be broken? What other records could be shattered? What other dreams that had seemed impossible could suddenly become reality? The Jamaican sprinters, for their part, handled the defeat with grace. They acknowledged that they had been beaten on this day by a better runner at this moment in time. But they also made it clear that the competition was far from over, that they would be back, that they were not going anywhere. And that's what made the competition so beautiful. It wasn't about one side being permanently better than the other. It was about two groups of elite athletes, each pushing the other to be better, each bringing out the best in each other, each making the sport more exciting and more compelling as a result. In the weeks and months that followed, the American sprinter became a national hero. She was invited to appear on talk shows. She was featured in magazines. She was the subject of countless interviews and articles and think pieces about what her victory meant for women's athletics, for American athletics, for the country as a whole. But what really resonated with so many people, particularly women in that 35 and older demographic, was the personal story. The story of someone who believed in herself when it would have been easier not to. The story of someone who worked harder than anyone else because she wanted it more. The story of someone who refused to accept that something was impossible just because others had failed before her. There's a particular kind of inspiration that comes from witnessing someone break a barrier like that. It's not abstract. It's not theoretical. You just saw it happen. You watched it unfold in real time. And if she could do that, if she could achieve something that had been deemed impossible by so many for so long, then what does that mean about the barriers in your own life? What does that mean about the things you've been told you can't do, the dreams you've put on hold, the possibilities you've stopped believing in? The American sprinter continued to train and compete at the highest level. She continued to push herself. She continued to improve. And while she never again ran quite as fast as that record-breaking 100 meters, she remained one of the elite sprinters in the world, a constant threat, a constant reminder that the old order had changed, that America was back in the conversation, that excellence was being reclaimed one race at a time. But here's what's really important about this story, and why I wanted to share it with you today. This isn't just about track and field. This isn't just about running fast. This is about the universal human experience of believing in yourself when it's hard, of pushing through obstacles, of refusing to accept limitations that others have placed on you, of discovering that you're capable of so much more than you ever thought possible. When you're 35, 40, 50 years old, you've lived long enough to understand that life is full of disappointments. You've lived long enough to know that not every dream works out the way you hoped. But you've also lived long enough to understand the value of effort, of persistence, of showing up day after day and doing the work even when you're not sure it's going to pay off. And when you see someone like this American sprinter refusing to accept the narrative that had been written about her event, that had been written about American sprinters, you see a reflection of your own potential. The training methods used by this American sprinter became the subject of intense study. Coaches around the world wanted to understand what had made her so fast, what had unlocked the potential that had always been there but had never been fully realized before. There were interviews with her strength coach, her speed coach, her mental health professional. Everyone wanted to understand the formula, the secret, the missing ingredient that had allowed her to achieve something that so many others had tried and failed to do. What they discovered was that there was no single secret. There was no magic bullet. What there was a combination of factors. Scientific training methods, cutting-edge nutrition, mental coaching and visualization. Surrounding herself with a team of people who believed in her. Setting realistic but ambitious goals and working backward from those goals to create a training plan. And perhaps most importantly, a mindset that refused to accept defeat, that viewed setbacks as learning opportunities rather than terminal failures, that understood that improvement happens incrementally, that greatness is built one day at a time, one training session at a time, one competition at a time. The Jamaican sprinters, rather than disappearing into irrelevance, actually rose to the challenge. They were motivated by the loss. They began to train harder. They studied what the American had done. They made adjustments to their own programs. And within the next Olympic cycle, there were races between American and Jamaican sprinters that were some of the most exciting competitive moments in athletics in recent memory. The rivalry became the kind of rivalry that elevates the entire sport, that brings out the best in both competitors, that creates the kind of moments that people remember for the rest of their lives. What's fascinating is how this story resonated beyond the world of athletics. In offices across America, women who had nothing to do with sports were talking about this American sprinter. They were talking about what her victory meant. They were talking about the power of believing in yourself. They were talking about refusing to accept limitations. And many of them, women in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and even beyond, started to think differently about their own lives, their own goals, their own dreams that they had set aside or never really pursued because they thought they weren't possible. This is one of the remarkable things about witnessing greatness, about watching someone achieve something extraordinary. It's contagious. It spreads. It inspires. It creates a ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate accomplishment. Yes, this American sprinter won a race and set a world record. But in doing so, she also gave permission to countless other people to believe in themselves a little more, to push a little harder, to refuse to accept the limitations that others were trying to place on them. The media attention eventually died down, as media attention always does. The American sprinter settled into her life as one of the world's greatest sprinters, still training, still competing, still pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The Jamaican sprinters continued to compete at the highest level. And the sport of athletics moved forward, enriched by the rivalry, elevated by the competition, made more exciting by the fact that nothing was guaranteed, that on any given day, anything could happen. But for those who were there, either in person or watching on screens around the world, for those who witnessed that moment when the American sprinter crossed the finish line first and the world record was shattered, that memory remained. That moment remained. That feeling of witnessing the impossible become possible, of watching someone refuse to accept that something couldn't be done and then go ahead and do it anyway, that's something that stays with you. And now, as you think about your own life, as you think about the things you want to achieve, the barriers you want to break, the limitations you want to overcome, you have this story. You have this image in your mind of an American woman who refused to accept that the 100 meters belonged to Jamaica, who believed she could do what had never been done, who worked harder than anyone else, who faced down the pressure and the doubt and the fear, and who came out the other side with a world record and a place in history. The question that I want to leave you with is this: what's your 100 meters? What's the thing that you've been told you can't do, or that you've convinced yourself you can't do, or that you've put off doing because the barriers seem too high, the competition seemed too fierce, or the odds seemed too stacked against you? And more importantly, what would change in your life if you approached that thing the way this American sprinter approached hers? What if you refused to accept the narrative that had been written about what's possible for you? What if you started training, started preparing, started believing, started pushing yourself the way she did? This is what makes this story so powerful, especially for women like you, women who have lived long enough to understand both the limitations and the possibilities that life offers. You've seen how small changes, sustained over time, can lead to big results. You've seen how belief can move mountains. You've seen how the right mindset, combined with hard work and persistence, can lead to the kind of outcomes that seemed impossible. And if you want to discover more stories like this, if you want to find inspiration in the lives of other people who have refused to accept the limitations that were placed on them, if you want to learn the techniques and the strategies and the mindsets that successful people use to achieve extraordinary things, then I encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Click that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. And join thousands of other people who are on a journey of self-discovery and self-improvement, who are refusing to accept that their best days are behind them, who are pushing themselves to achieve more than they ever thought possible. Because the truth is, you don't need to be a world-class sprinter to benefit from the lessons that this story teaches. You don't need to be competing on a world stage to learn from the discipline, the determination, and the belief that this American sprinter demonstrated. These principles apply to whatever you're doing, whether it's building a business, pursuing a career change, getting healthier, improving your relationships, or any other area of your life where you want to see improvement and growth. The barriers that we face are often mental. They're often internal. We've internalized the messages that we've been told throughout our lives about what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. We've accepted the limitations that the world has tried to place on us. But this story shows us that those limitations are not absolute. They can be overcome. They can be shattered. They can be rewritten by anyone who is willing to put in the work, who is willing to believe, who is willing to push past the fear and the doubt and the discomfort that inevitably come with pursuing greatness. So as you go through the rest of your day, I want you to carry this story with you. I want you to remember the image of that American sprinter crossing the finish line first, setting a world record, proving to the entire world that the impossible had just become possible. And I want you to think about what that means for your own life, your own goals, your own dreams. Because the same potential that was inside that American sprinter is inside you as well. The same capacity for greatness, for excellence, for breaking through barriers and rewriting the narrative about what's possible. Subscribe to this channel. Don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Because we're going to continue to bring you stories of real people who have achieved extraordinary things, people who have refused to accept the limitations that others tried to place on them, people who have discovered their own capacity for greatness. These are the stories that matter. These are the stories that inspire. These are the stories that remind us of what we're truly capable of achieving when we believe in ourselves and commit to the work that's necessary to make those beliefs a reality. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for allowing me to share this incredible story with you. And I'll see you in the next video, where we explore another amazing story of human determination, resilience, and the incredible power of refusing to accept that something is impossible.